The sound of laughter drifted through the air vents of our Victorian townhouse, a sound that once would have warmed my heart. Now it made my blood run cold. I pressed my ear closer to the vent in my home office, the ornate brass grate cool against my skin. Habibi, how much longer? A woman's voice, sultry and impatient, speaking Arabic with a Damascus accent. I'm tired of hiding in your own home like some secret. My husband Kareem's response came in the same language, his Beirut accent unmistakable. Soon, ya rohi. She'll be gone soon. The divorce papers are almost ready. This house, everything, it'll all be ours. I sat back in my leather chair, my hands trembling not with sadness, but with a fury so cold it felt like ice crystallizing in my veins. They thought I couldn't understand. For 3 years of marriage, Kareem had assumed his American wife, born and raised in Seattle, couldn't possibly comprehend Arabic. What he didn't know was that I'd spent 4 years in Cairo, 2 in Beirut, and another 3 in Dubai, building my career as an international property developer. I spoke 5 dialects fluently, but more importantly, what neither of them knew was that I owned this house, and the company where Kareem worked, and the luxury apartment building where I suspected his mistress lived, and about 47 other properties across 3 states. I opened my laptop and pulled up the property deed for my townhouse. Maya Blackwell, sole owner, purchased with cash 2 years before I even met Kareem. I allowed myself a small smile. Let them plan, let them dream. Tomorrow, reality would come crashing down. Before I continue this story, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here. If you're enjoying this journey of truth and justice, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us build this incredible community. Now, let's dive deeper. 3 years ago, I'd been at a gallery opening in Georgetown, admiring a controversial piece about modern displacement, when a handsome man with olive skin and warm brown eyes approached me. Provocative, isn't it? He'd said, gesturing to the artwork. The artist really captures the essence of belonging nowhere, or belonging everywhere, I'd countered, intrigued by his interpretation. That was Kareem Khalil, charming, educated, with a master's degree in architecture from Columbia. He worked as a senior project manager at Meridian Development Group. What he didn't know, what I'd been very careful to hide, was that I owned Meridian through a web of holding companies and investment trusts. I'd learned the hard way to protect myself. At 26, fresh off my first major development success, I dated Marcus Chen, a venture capitalist who seemed genuinely interested in me. 6 months into our relationship, I discovered he'd been using insider information about my projects to make competitive bids. The betrayal had cost me a deal worth $12 million and taught me an invaluable lesson. Never reveal your hand until you're ready to play it. So when I met Kareem, I presented myself as Maya Blackwell, freelance architectural consultant. I drove a modest Honda Civic that I kept specifically for dates. I wore clothes from Macy's instead of the designer pieces hanging in my actual closet. I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment in Arlington for 6 months, just to maintain the illusion. Kareem had seemed perfect. He was passionate about sustainable urban development, spoke beautifully about creating spaces that honored both heritage and progress. He treated me with respect, split checks, and never asked about my finances. When he proposed after 18 months, I thought I'd finally found someone who loved me for me, not for my money. How naive I'd been. The wedding had been small, intimate. My mother, always my protector, had pulled me aside. Maya, sweetheart. Are you sure about this? You barely know his family. And hiding your success, it's not healthy. I know what I'm doing, Mom, I'd assured her. I'll tell him after the wedding. Once I'm sure. But somehow, the right moment never came. We moved into what I told him was our house. He never questioned why we didn't have a mortgage payment. I said I'd inherited it from a distant uncle. He accepted this without digging deeper, which should have been my first red flag. His salary at Meridian was comfortable, $180,000 a year, which I'd deliberately set slightly above market rate to avoid suspicion. He paid for groceries, utilities, date nights. I pretended to struggle with my consulting business, even creating a fake website and business cards. The deception had become a full-time performance. Then, about 6 months ago, things changed. Kareem became distant. He started working late, taking calls in Arabic that he'd hurriedly end when I entered the room. He bought a second phone that he kept locked. The signs were all there. blazing like neon in the darkness. But I needed proof. So I hired someone. Not just any investigator, Nadia Hassan, a former Mossad agent turned private detective who specialized in cases involving Middle Eastern communities. She was discreet, thorough, and spoke 8 languages. The report she delivered 3 weeks ago had been comprehensive and damning. Kareem had been seeing Layla Mansour for 8 months. Layla was a 32-year-old jewelry designer who'd recently moved to D.C. from Dubai. She lived in one of my luxury apartments in Capitol Hill, paying $4,500 a month in rent. The irony was almost poetic. But the affair wasn't the worst part. Nadia had uncovered something far more sinister. Kareem had been systematically photographing documents from my home office, capturing project proposals, financial statements, property deeds. He'd been feeding this information to Layla, who had connections to a development group in Dubai that had been underbidding my projects for months. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was stealing from me, and he was doing it all while living in my house, working for my company, and planning to divorce me to take half of what he thought we jointly owned. The audio from downstairs pulled me back to the present. I'd installed security cameras and microphones throughout the house last month, all hidden in smoke detectors, picture frames, and electrical outlets. Everything was being recorded, backed up to secure cloud servers, and reviewed by my legal team. But what about the prenup? Layla asked, her voice carrying a note of concern. Kareem laughed. There is no prenup. I made sure of that. She was so in love, so trusting. She signed the marriage certificate without any protection. In D.C., marital property splits 50-50. This house alone is worth $2.3 million. Plus, she'll have to pay me alimony since she barely works. More laughter. I pulled up the audio feed on my computer, watching the video of my husband and his mistress lounging on my Italian leather sofa, drinking wine from my crystal glasses. Layla was beautiful, I had to admit. Honey-colored hair, expertly highlighted. Olive skin that glowed even through the security camera feed. She wore a designer dress that I recognized from the Elie Saab collection, $8,000 retail. Her jewelry sparkled with what looked like genuine diamonds, all funded by the rent I was charging her and the information Kareem was providing. When will you file? Layla asked, running her fingers through Kareem's hair. Next month, he replied. My lawyer says we need to establish the marriage is irretrievably broken. I've been documenting her financial instability, her inability to contribute to the household. We'll paint her as a dependent spouse who needs support. And then we can finally be together openly, Layla sighed. No more sneaking around. We can travel, be seen in public. You can meet my family in Dubai properly. I've already been researching properties in Dubai, Kareem said. With my half of the divorce settlement, we can buy something spectacular. Maybe start our own development firm. I know all of Maya's contacts. Her strategies will be unstoppable. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. They had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow was Saturday, the day I'd arranged for several things to happen simultaneously. The board meeting, where I would reveal myself as CEO. The audit that would uncover Kareem's information theft. The meeting with Layla's landlord me, where certain rental violations would be discussed. But tonight, I had one more performance to give. I saved my files, locked my computer, and stood up. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I'd worn my most downtrodden outfit today, an old sweater. Jeans with a small stain on the knee, minimal makeup. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun. I looked exactly like the struggling consultant they thought I was. Time to go downstairs. I made sure to walk heavily, to let them hear me coming. By the time I reached the living room, Layla had vanished, probably into the guest bathroom. Kareem was alone, scrolling through his phone with a casual air that made my stomach turn. "Oh, you're still up," he said, barely glancing at me. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." "Couldn't sleep," I said softly, playing my part. "I was working on some proposals. Trying to land that Jefferson Street project," he snorted. "Maya, that project is way out of your league. The firm handling it is top tier. You really need to be more realistic about your capabilities." The firm handling it was mine. The Jefferson Street project was my flagship development, a mixed-use complex that would revitalize an entire neighborhood. I'd been planning it for 2 years. "You're probably right," I said, injecting defeat into my voice. "I just thought, maybe this time." "Look," Kareem said, finally looking up from his phone. "I think we need to talk. Maybe tomorrow?" About our future? My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. About our future? Yeah, some serious conversations we need to have. But not tonight, I'm exhausted. Of course, I said. Tomorrow is fine. I actually have some plans in the morning, but we can talk after lunch? He nodded, already dismissing me. Sure, whatever works. I turned to leave, then paused. Kareem? Did someone drop by earlier? I thought I heard voices. He didn't even flinch. Just a work call. Conference with Dubai. Time zones, you know. Oh, okay. I started walking away, then stopped at the doorway. In Arabic, clear and perfect, I said, Tosba 7, 3 ala khair, Habibi. Good night, my love. I watched his face in the reflection of the hallway mirror. He froze for just a second. A flash of confusion crossing his features. But then it was gone. Replaced by his usual dismissive expression. He probably thought he'd imagined it. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, listening as Layla emerged from her hiding place. Is she gone? I heard her whisper. Yes. God, she's so pathetic. Tomorrow I'm filing. I can't do this anymore. In our bedroom, my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my personal phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the one I needed. Nadia, it's Maya. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Yes, everything is ready. The board meeting is at 10. The audit starts at 10:30. I'll need you at the house by 11 with the documentation. And Nadia, thank you for everything. I hung up and opened my closet. Behind my everyday clothes hung my real wardrobe. Armani, Chanel, Tom Ford. Tomorrow I wouldn't be Maya, the struggling consultant. Tomorrow I would be Maya Blackwell, CEO of Meridian Development Group and sole owner of a real estate empire worth $340 million. I pulled out a power suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, paired with Louboutin heels, and a Cartier watch that cost more than Kareem's car. I laid them out carefully, a uniform for the battle ahead. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Tomorrow's the day? I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Your father would be too. Give them hell. I smiled, thinking of my father. He died when I was 19, leaving my mother and me with nothing but debt from his failed construction business. His partner had betrayed him, stolen his designs, left him holding worthless contracts. The stress had triggered the heart attack that killed him. I'd sworn then that I would never be powerless, never be cheated, never let anyone take what was mine. I'd put myself through college working 3 jobs, earned my MBA at 24, and started flipping houses with a $50,000 loan from a mentor who saw my potential. 10 years later, I was untouchable. Except I'd made one mistake. I'd fallen in love. I'd trusted. I'd believed that maybe, just maybe, someone could love me without wanting something from me. But tomorrow, I would correct that mistake. I heard Layla leaving through the front door, her heels clicking on the marble foyer. Heard Kareem setting the alarm system I owned, monitored by my security company, recording every entry and exit. Heard him climbing the stairs to our bedroom. I quickly changed into my pajamas and slipped under the covers, feigning sleep. He came in, moving quietly, smelling of Layla's perfume. Dior j'adore. I recognized it. He slid into bed beside me, careful not to wake me. Soon, I heard him whisper to himself. Soon I'll be free of this dead weight. I kept my breathing steady, even, while inside I counted down the hours until morning. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and returned to my office. I went through every document again, every piece of evidence. Nadia's investigation had been thorough. She'd documented every meeting between Kareem and Layla, every document he'd photographed, every piece of information he'd sold. She'd tracked the money trail from Dubai to a shell company, from the shell company to an offshore account in Kareem's name. She'd recorded conversations, gathered witnesses, built a case that was absolutely ironclad. But the evidence of corporate espionage was just the beginning. We'd also found irregularities in his work at Meridian, falsified reports, inflated expenses, kickbacks from contractors. Kareem had been skimming money for months, thinking no one would notice. He'd been embezzling from my own company while sleeping in my bed. The fury I felt was cold, calculated, pure. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. At 6 a.m., I showered and began preparing. I styled my hair in a sleek, professional updo. Applied makeup with precision, not the minimal look of Maya the consultant, but the polished appearance of a CEO. I dressed in my power suit, each piece of clothing armor for the day ahead. I looked at myself in the mirror. This was who I really was. Not the diminished version I'd been playing for 3 years. Not the struggling consultant who couldn't land a client. But Maya Blackwell, a woman who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd turned a $50,000 loan into $340 million, who'd survived betrayal and loss, and come out stronger. Kareem was still sleeping when I left the bedroom. I paused at the door, looking back at him. In sleep, he looked innocent, peaceful. But I knew better now. I knew what he was capable of. What he'd planned for me. Downstairs, I made coffee strong, black. Exactly how I liked it. I sat at the kitchen island and reviewed my notes for the board meeting one last time. At 8:45, my phone buzzed. Miss Blackwell, your car is here. My driver, James, whom Kareem had never met. I grabbed my briefcase, Italian leather, monogrammed, filled with documents that would change everything, and headed for the door. Maya? Kareem's voice called from upstairs. Where are you going so early? I turned, looking up at him standing at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, confused. I have a meeting, I said simply. A meeting? On Saturday? Who has meetings on Saturday? I smiled. People who actually run companies, Kareem. I'll be back by noon. We can have that talk you wanted then. His face showed confusion, then suspicion. What meeting? What company? But I was already out the door, sliding into the back of the black Mercedes that James had waiting. As we pulled away, I looked back at the townhouse, my townhouse where Kareem stood in the doorway. Bewildered. The office, Miss Blackwell, James asked. The office, I confirmed. It's time for everyone to meet the real Maya Blackwell. The Meridian Development Group headquarters occupied 15 floors of a glass tower in downtown D.C. I'd designed the building myself, every detail reflecting my vision of what a modern development company should be: transparent, forward-thinking, sustainable. The lobby featured a water wall, living plant walls, and floors made from reclaimed wood. Everything communicated care, quality, precision. The security guard at the front desk looked up as I entered. Good morning, Miss Blackwell. The board is assembling in the executive conference room. Thank you, Marcus. Everything ready? Yes, ma'am. It has the presentations loaded. Legal is standing by. And your guest list has been confirmed. My guest list. The board members, of course. My CFO, COO, and general counsel. The head of HR. And 3 special additions. Kareem Khalil, who'd been told there was an emergency Saturday meeting for senior project managers. Layla Mansour, who'd been invited as a potential jewelry supplier for our new retail development. And Detective Sarah Chen, from the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department's white-collar crime unit. I took the private elevator to the 15th floor, emerging into the executive suite that even most of my employees had never seen. My office took up the entire corner, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the Capitol Dome and the Washington Monument. The desk was custom-made from a single piece of walnut. The artwork on the walls included an original Rothko and a photograph signed by Annie Leibovitz. This was my domain, my empire, and today, everyone would know it. At 9:55, I entered the conference room. The board was already assembled, 8 members, carefully chosen over the years. Margaret Chen, former Secretary of Housing. David Ibrahim, a Palestinian-American developer, who'd mentored me. Lisa Santos, a finance genius who'd helped structure my holding companies. They all knew me, trusted me, had helped build Meridian into what it was. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. Thank you for coming on a Saturday. I know this is unusual, but today we have some important revelations to address. Our CFO will begin with a presentation on some irregularities discovered during our quarterly audit. Thomas Wu, my CFO, dimmed the lights and brought up the first slide. It showed a series of transactions, highlighted in red. Over the past 8 months, we've identified approximately $340,000 in fraudulent expenses, falsified reports, and kickbacks traced to senior management. The board members leaned forward, their attention locked on the screen. Thomas continued, methodically laying out the evidence. Fake invoices. Inflated budgets. Money transferred to offshore accounts. And finally, the last slide, a photograph of Kareem Khalil. The source of these irregularities has been identified as Kareem Khalil, Senior Project Manager, Infrastructure Development. At exactly 10:15, as planned, there was a knock on the conference room door. My assistant opened it, and Kareem walked in, looking confused and slightly annoyed. "I was told there was an emergency meeting," he said, then stopped short when he saw me sitting at the head of the table in my Armani suit, looking nothing like the wife he thought he knew. "Maya?" His voice cracked. What is this?" I stood, my heels adding 3 inches to my height, making me look down at him with all the authority I'd earned. "Mr. Khalil, thank you for joining us. Please have a seat. We have quite a bit to discuss, starting with the $340,000 you've embezzled from this company." "My company." The color drained from his face. "Your company?" "Maya, what are you talking about?" "Sit down, Kareem," I said, my voice cold as winter steel. "We're just getting started. In a few minutes, I have someone else joining us. A jewelry designer named Layla Mansour. I believe you know her?" His mouth opened, then closed. He looked around the room at the stern faces of the board members, at the evidence displayed on the screen, at me standing there in clothes that cost more than his monthly salary. "I think," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper, "I need a lawyer." "Yes," I agreed. "You definitely do. But first, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Maya Blackwell. I am the founder and CEO of Meridian Development Group. I own this company through a series of holding companies and trusts established over the past decade. I own the townhouse you've been living in. I own the apartment building where your mistress lives. And Mr. Khalil, I own you." The door opened again. Layla walked in, stunning in a designer dress, her jewelry portfolio in hand. She started to smile, ready to make her pitch, then saw Kareem sitting there, ashen-faced, then saw me. "I'm sorry," she said in Arabic. "I think I'm in the wrong meeting." "No," I replied in flawless Arabic, my Damascus accent matching hers perfectly. "You're exactly where you need to be. Please, sit down. We have much to discuss, starting with the industrial espionage you and Mr. Khalil have been committing." Her face went white. She looked at Kareem, who looked at me, and in that moment, they both realized the same thing. They'd been played. Completely and thoroughly played. "Before we continue," I said, switching back to English, "I'd like to introduce Detective Sarah Chen from the Metropolitan Police Department. She's been working with our legal team on this investigation." "Detective?" Sarah stepped forward, her badge gleaming. "Mr. Khalil, Miss Mansour. You're both under investigation for corporate espionage, embezzlement, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As she read them their rights, I sat back down at the head of my table, in my company, in my city, and watched as the empire I'd built single-handedly proved its strength. Kareem kept looking at me, his face a mixture of shock, fear, and something that might have been grudging respect. "How long?" he finally asked. "How long have you known?" "About the affair?" 8 months. "About the espionage?" 6 months. "About your plans to divorce me and take half of what you thought was our property?" I paused. "Since the day you started planning it. You see, Kareem, every conversation you've had in my house has been recorded. Every document you've photographed has been tracked. Every financial transaction has been monitored. I've known everything." "Then why wait?" Layla demanded, finding her voice. "Why let us continue?" I smiled. "Because I needed to build an airtight case. Because I wanted to ensure that when justice came, it would be absolute. And because, frankly, I wanted to watch you both dig your graves deeper. You did excellent work, by the way. The evidence you provided through your own actions will ensure very long prison sentences." The detective finished reading their rights and produced handcuffs. As she moved toward them, Kareem held up a hand. "Wait, please. Maya, can we talk? Privately?" I considered this. 5 minutes. "Detective, would you wait outside?" Sarah nodded and stepped out, taking Layla with her. The board members also filed out, leaving Kareem and me alone in the conference room. He slumped in his chair, all the arrogance and confidence gone. "How?" he asked. "How did you hide all this? The money? The company? Everything?" "Because I've been betrayed before," I said simply. "Because I learned early that people see dollar signs instead of human beings. Because when I met you, I wanted to know if you could love me, just me, without the money. And you know what? You failed that test. Maya, no, I cut him off. You don't get to explain or apologize. You made your choices. You mocked me in my own home. You stole from me. You planned to divorce me and take what you thought was half of what I'd built. You brought another woman into my house, into my bed. You called me pathetic, dead weight, something to be gotten rid of. Those were your choices. I never loved you, he said quietly. From the beginning, I thought you were nobody. An easy target. When Layla came along with her connections, the opportunity was too good to pass up. The honesty was almost refreshing. Thank you for that, at least, for not insulting me further with lies. What happens now? He asked. Now? Now you're arrested. Both you and Layla. The prosecutor has a very strong case. Espionage. Embezzlement. Fraud. Conspiracy. You'll go to trial. You'll be convicted. And you'll spend the next 15 to 20 years in federal prison. When you get out, you'll be deported. Immigration has been very interested in your visa irregularities. You'll never work in development again. Your reputation will be destroyed. And Layla's family in Dubai, who value honor above all else, will learn exactly what kind of woman she is. He flinched at each statement, reality settling over him like a shroud. And the divorce? He asked. Oh, we'll still get divorced. But there will be no settlement, no splitting of assets. You'll leave with exactly what you brought into this marriage, nothing. I have an ironclad prenup that you signed. But you said we didn't. We didn't? I pulled a document from my briefcase. This is a prenuptial agreement. Signed by both of us 3 days before our wedding. You were drunk at your bachelor party. I had you sign it along with several other documents, party waivers, vendor contracts. You never even looked at what you were signing. His face showed the moment he realized how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. You planned this? From the beginning? I planned to protect myself. You're the one who chose to betray me. That was all you, Kareem. I stood up, smoothing my suit. Our 5 minutes are up. Detective Chen is waiting. You should go with her quietly, it'll look better in court. As I reached the door, he called out one more time. Maya? Did you ever actually love me? I turned back, considering the question. Yes, I said honestly. For about 6 months, I actually did. I thought maybe you were different. Maybe you were real. But then I saw who you really were, and that killed whatever love I had faster than any affair could have. I opened the door. Sarah and her partner came in and cuffed Kareem. As they led him away, he looked back at me one more time. I met his gaze steadily, without pity, without regret. This was justice, pure and simple. The board reconvened after the arrests. We had business to conduct: approval of new projects, review of quarterly earnings, discussion of expansion plans. The incident with Kareem was treated as exactly what it was, a personnel and security matter, now resolved. At noon, I left the office and James drove me home. To my house. The house that would never again be tainted by Kareem's presence. I stood in the doorway, looking at the living room where just last night I'd listened to them planning my downfall. The marble floors gleamed. The crystal glasses sat in the cabinet. Everything was as it should be. My phone rang. My mother. It's done? She asked. It's done, Mom. Justice served. Your father would be so proud. I'm so proud. You didn't let them break you. No, I agreed. They made me stronger. We talked for a few more minutes. Then I hung up and walked through my house, reclaiming each room. The living room where they'd laughed at me. The kitchen where I'd pretended to struggle. The bedroom where he'd planned my destruction. All mine. All safe now. I changed out of my power suit into comfortable clothes, real comfortable clothes from my own closet, and made myself a cup of tea. I sat in my living room, in my house, in the empire I'd built, and I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Tomorrow, the news would break. Kareem and Layla's arrests would be public. The legal proceedings would begin. But today, right now, it was just me and the victory I'd earned through patience, planning, and the strength to do what was necessary. My phone buzzed with a message from Nadia. Both suspects in custody. All evidence secured. Your testimony scheduled for next week. You did good, Maya. I smiled and typed back. We did good. Thank you for everything. Another message came through, this time from David Ibrahim, my mentor and board member. That was the most impressive display of strategic thinking I've seen in 30 years. Lunch next week to discuss the Dubai expansion? Absolutely. Tuesday? Tuesday it is. And Maya? Welcome back. We've missed seeing the real you. I set my phone down and looked around at my beautiful home. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in gold. In a few weeks, the locks would be changed. In a few months, the divorce would be final. In a few years, this would all be a story I'd tell about the time I almost let someone take everything from me. But today, I was simply Maya Blackwell, CEO, developer, survivor, winner, and I was exactly where I belonged. The week following the arrests moved with the precision of a well-orchestrated symphony. Monday morning, the news broke across every major business outlet. Senior executives at Meridian Development, arrested for corporate espionage. By noon, my phone had received 43 calls from journalists, competitors, and concerned business partners. I answered none of them. Instead, I sat in my office, my real office, the one on the 15th floor with the Rothko on the wall, and watched my PR team handle the narrative with surgical precision. Miss Blackwell has been cooperating fully with law enforcement for the past 6 months, my spokesperson told CNN. Her dedication to corporate integrity and transparency led to the discovery and prosecution of this criminal enterprise. Meridian Development Group remains committed to ethical business practices and will emerge from this stronger than ever. The stock price of my publicly traded subsidiary initially dipped by 7%, then rallied by 12%, as investors realized the cancer had been cut out. By Wednesday, we were trending upward, and 3 major institutional investors had reached out about increasing their positions. But the professional victory, satisfying as it was, paled in comparison to what happened on Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing contracts for the Jefferson Street project when my assistant buzzed. "Miss Blackwell, there's a Mrs. Mansour here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. She's Layla Mansour's mother." I paused, considering. "Send her in." The woman who entered my office was elegant, probably in her late 50s, wearing a conservative designer suit and a hijab styled with impeccable taste. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her bearing was proud. This was a woman who'd built a life on dignity and reputation, and her daughter had just destroyed both. "Mrs. Mansour," I said, standing and gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. "Please, sit." "You're very gracious, considering," she said in Arabic, her voice carrying the weight of shame and sorrow. "I came to apologize. For my daughter. For what she's done to you and your company." I switched to Arabic, matching her formal dialect. "You're not responsible for your daughter's choices. She's an adult, but I am responsible for how I raised her." Mrs. Mansour's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "I gave her everything. The best, schools, connections, opportunities. I thought I was teaching her to be ambitious. Instead, I taught her to be greedy, to take what doesn't belong to her." "Mrs. Mansour, please, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I came to America 30 years ago with nothing but my education and my dignity. I built a jewelry business from the ground up, just like you built yours. I know what it takes, the sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the constant fight to be taken seriously as a woman in a man's world. What my daughter did to you, what she tried to steal from you, it disgusts me." I saw genuine pain in her eyes, and despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy. "What will happen to your business?" "I've already begun selling it," she said simply. "The legal fees will be substantial. And frankly, after this scandal, my reputation in the community is destroyed. I'll help pay for her defense, because she's my daughter, but after that," she shook her head, "I'm returning to Lebanon, starting over, if I can." "That seems harsh," I said carefully. "You're not the one who committed crimes, but I'm the one who raised someone who could." "Mrs. Mansour stood, adjusting her hijab. "I wanted you to know that not everyone in our family is without honor. And I wanted to tell you that what you've built is remarkable. You should be proud." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about mothers and daughters, about the legacies we leave, and the lessons we teach. My own mother had taught me resilience, caution, and the importance of protecting yourself. Mrs. Mansour had tried to teach ambition but had somehow lost ethics along the way. Wednesday brought Kareem's parents. They didn't come to my office, they came to my home. I'd changed the locks on Monday, but they stood outside, his mother crying, his father stoic and silent. I could have ignored them. Should have, probably. But I opened the door. "Please," Kareem's mother said in Arabic, her voice breaking. "Please, show mercy. He's our only son. He made a mistake, but 20 years in prison? It will destroy him. It will destroy us." Kareem's father said nothing, but his eyes held a mixture of anger and pleading. Anger at me for prosecuting? Or anger at his son for being stupid enough to get caught? I couldn't tell. "Your son didn't make a mistake," I said quietly. "He made a calculated series of choices over months. He stole from my company. He betrayed our marriage. He planned to destroy me financially and emotionally. Those weren't mistakes, they were crimes." "But you led him on," his mother cried. "You pretended to be poor. You trapped him." "I gave him every opportunity to love me for who I was, not what I had. He failed that test spectacularly." I kept my voice level, refusing to be baited into anger. And even if I had been the struggling consultant he thought I was, his actions would still have been wrong. He still would have cheated. He still would have stolen. My money didn't make him a criminal, his character did. "He's a good boy," his mother insisted, tears streaming down her face. "He just got involved with the wrong woman. That Layla, she corrupted him." "No," I interrupted. "Layla didn't corrupt him. They corrupted each other. And your son is 34 years old, he's not a boy. He's a man who made adult choices and now faces adult consequences." Kareem's father finally spoke. "What do you want? Money? We'll pay you back every dollar." "I don't want your money. I want justice. And I want to never see or hear from your family again. If you truly love your son, use whatever resources you have to get him a good lawyer. But don't come to me asking for mercy he never showed when he was planning my destruction." I closed the door on their protests and returned to my living room. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if removing Kareem's presence had lifted a physical weight from the walls. Thursday was the preliminary hearing. I sat in the courtroom dressed in a navy blue suit, flanked by my legal team. Kareem and Layla sat at separate tables with their respective attorneys, both looking diminished in their orange jumpsuits. They'd been denied bail flight risks, given their international connections. The prosecutor laid out the case with devastating efficiency. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations, financial records, photographs of stolen documents, testimony from the forensic accountant who'd traced the money. The defense attorneys looked increasingly defeated as each piece of evidence was presented. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my head high. The prosecutor asked me to explain my relationship to Meridian Development Group. I founded the company 12 years ago with a $50,000 loan and an idea. Today, Meridian is worth approximately $340 million and employs over 800 people. I own the company through a series of holding companies and trusts, a structure designed to protect my privacy and the integrity of the business. And your relationship to the defendant, Kareem Khalil? I met him 3 years ago and married him 2 years ago. I did not reveal my ownership of Meridian or my personal wealth because I wanted to ensure he loved me for myself, not my money. I presented myself as a struggling consultant and observed his behavior. Did you ever suspect he was involved in criminal activity? Yes. About 8 months ago, I noticed documents in my home office had been moved. I hired a private investigator and discovered Mr. Tens. Khalil was photographing confidential materials and selling information to competitors. I also discovered his affair with Miss Mansour and their plan to divorce me and attempt to claim half of what they believed was marital property. The defense attorney for Kareem stood up. "Miss Blackwell, isn't it true that you deliberately deceived my client? That you entrapped him?" "No," I said calmly. "I presented myself as someone with less money than I have. I didn't force him to commit espionage. I didn't force him to steal from the company. I didn't force him to commit adultery. He made those choices independently. But if I'd been honest, he would have stolen more and hidden it better." My caution was proved justified by his actions. I looked directly at Kareem. "The truth is, counselor, your client saw what he thought was a vulnerable woman and decided to exploit her. The fact that I wasn't actually vulnerable doesn't change his intent or his crimes." The preliminary hearing ended with both defendants bound over for trial. As I left the courthouse, a small crowd of reporters shouted questions. My PR person gave a brief statement, justice is being served, and we moved on. Friday. I met with the board to discuss the fallout and future strategy. Margaret Chen opened the meeting with a smile. Well, Maya, you've certainly made your public debut memorable. Half of Washington is talking about the mysterious CEO who took down her criminal husband. Not the publicity I'd have chosen, I admitted. But at least it's honest. David Ibrahim leaned forward. The question now is, where do we go from here? We have the Jefferson Street project ready to launch. We have the Dubai expansion on the table. Do we proceed as planned? We proceed, I said firmly. We don't let criminals derail us. Jefferson Street breaks ground next month as scheduled. Dubai gets approved today, and we implement new security protocols to ensure this never happens again. Lisa Santos, my CFO, pulled up a presentation. I've been working with cybersecurity consultants. We're recommending a complete overhaul of our information security systems, mandatory background checks for all employees with access to sensitive information, and regular audits. Cost is approximately $2.3 million. Approved, I said immediately. What else? HR wants to implement ethics training across all departments. They're also recommending we create a whistleblower hotline for employees to report suspected wrongdoing anonymously. Also approved. What's the timeline? 6 weeks for full implementation. The meeting continued for 3 hours, covering every aspect of the business. By the end, we had a comprehensive plan to not just recover from the scandal but to emerge stronger and more resilient. As everyone filed out, David lingered. Maya, can I speak with you privately? We settled into the chairs by the window overlooking the Capitol. David had been my mentor since I was 25. Fresh out of business school and hungry to prove myself, he'd given me advice, connections, and once, when I desperately needed it, a loan to close my first major deal. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Not just for catching them, but for how you've handled everything. The dignity. The professionalism. Your father would be proud too. My throat tightened. I wish he could see this. He can. David said. Men like your father. They build more than businesses. They build character in their children. Every decision you made here. The patience. The careful documentation. The refusal to let emotion cloud judgment. That's his legacy. He died because his partner betrayed him, I said softly. It destroyed him. I swore I'd never let that happen to me. And you didn't. You were smarter, more careful, more strategic. But Maya? David paused, choosing his words carefully. Don't let this make you cynical. Don't let Kareem's betrayal close you off from trusting people entirely. How can I trust after this? By learning to recognize the difference between someone like Kareem and someone genuine? By letting people earn your trust gradually rather than hiding who you are completely. You're an extraordinary woman with an extraordinary success story. You shouldn't have to hide that. I thought about his words as I drove home that evening. He was right. In a way. The deception had protected me from losing my assets, but it had also cost me 3 years of my life living a lie. There had to be a middle ground between complete vulnerability and complete concealment. The weekend brought unexpected peace. I spent Saturday morning at the gym, pushing my body hard, sweating out the stress of the week. Saturday afternoon, I met my mother for lunch at our favorite Vietnamese restaurant in Arlington. You look good, she said, studying me across the table. Tired, but good, like a weight's been lifted. Several weights, I agreed. A lying husband. A theft problem. The stress of maintaining a fake identity. I can be myself again. How does that feel? I considered the question. Strange. Liberating. A little scary. For 3 years, I've been playing a role. Now I have to figure out who I actually am without the performance. You're the same person you've always been, my mother said firmly. Strong, smart, capable. The only thing that's changed is now the world knows it. We talked about the trial, about the business, about her plans to finally take that trip to Portugal she'd been postponing for years. It felt good to just be mother and daughter again, without secrets between us. Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the National Gallery alone, wandering through rooms of art with no agenda, no timetable, no one to pretend for. I stood in front of a Monet water lily painting for 20 minutes. letting the blues and greens wash over me. Feeling something close to peace. My phone buzzed. A message from Nadia. Final investigative report completed. All loose ends tied. Case is airtight. Congrats, Maya. You won. I had won. But standing there in the gallery, I realized something important. This wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about reclaiming myself. The trial began 3 months later. I'd spent the intervening time focusing on work, on the Jefferson Street project, on being the CEO I'd hidden for too long. The company had rallied after the initial shock, our stock price hitting record highs. Clients who'd worked with representatives for years finally met me in person and seemed pleasantly surprised to discover the mysterious founder was a real person. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified again, this time in greater detail about the investigation, the evidence, the impact of the crimes on my company and my life. The defense tried to paint me as vindictive, as a scorned wife seeking revenge rather than justice. Miss Blackwell, Kareem's attorney said during cross-examination, isn't it true that you could have simply divorced your husband? Why pursue criminal charges? Because he committed crimes, I said simply. If someone robs a bank, the bank doesn't just divorce them, they press charges. My husband stole from my company, sold confidential information to competitors, and caused financial harm to my business and employees. That's not a personal matter, it's a criminal one. But you're a multi-millionaire. The $340,000 he embezzled is pocket change to you. It's not about the amount. It's about the principle. If I let someone steal from me without consequences, what message does that send? That wealthy people are acceptable targets? That crimes don't matter if the victim can afford the loss? No. Everyone, regardless of their bank balance, deserves justice. The prosecutor was brilliant, methodically building the case brick by brick. Phone records showing hundreds of calls between Kareem and Layla. Bank records showing the mysterious deposits. The photographs Kareem had taken of proprietary documents. The recorded conversations in my house where they discussed their plans in detail. When the recordings played in court, Kareem's voice saying, "She'll be gone soon." Layla asking about the prenup. Both of them laughing about my supposed unemployment. I saw several jurors' faces harden. This wasn't just about corporate crime. This was about betrayal at its most personal level. Layla's defense was that Kareem had manipulated her, that she'd believed his lies about me being cruel and controlling. The prosecutor demolished that narrative by showing texts where Layla had actively encouraged Kareem to steal more documents, had provided contacts in Dubai who would pay for information, had even researched how to hide money in offshore accounts. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Kareem got 18 years in federal prison. Layla got 15. Both would be deported upon release. Kareem to Lebanon, Layla to the UAE, where her family's shame would follow her forever. As the verdict was read, Kareem turned to look at me. I met his gaze steadily. There was no satisfaction in seeing him destroyed, but there was closure. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, I gave a brief statement to the press. This case was never about revenge. It was about accountability. My hope is that this sends a message that corporate crime has consequences, regardless of personal relationships. I'm grateful to law enforcement, to the prosecutors, and to the jury for their dedication to justice. The divorce finalized 2 weeks after the criminal trial ended. Kareem's attorney tried one last time to claim marital assets, but my prenup was ironclad. He left the marriage with exactly what he'd brought into it: his personal belongings and his law school debt. The house, the company, the empire I'd built all remained mine. 6 months after the trial, I stood at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Jefferson Street project. 200 people gathered to watch as we broke ground on what would become a transformative development: mixed-use housing with 40% affordable units, retail spaces prioritizing local businesses, green spaces, and a community center. The mayor spoke, praising Meridian's commitment to ethical development and community investment. David Ibrahim spoke about sustainable urban growth. Then it was my turn. I looked out at the crowd: journalists, city officials, community leaders, my employees. For the first time in years, I was standing in public as exactly who I was: Maya Blackwell, CEO, developer, survivor. This project represents everything I believe in, I said. Not just buildings, but community. Not just profit, but purpose. Not just growth, but sustainability. When my father died, he left me with very little money, but a wealth of values, integrity, honesty, and the belief that success means nothing if it's not built on a foundation of ethics. I paused, looking directly at the cameras. Earlier this year, my company faced a significant challenge when criminal activity was discovered within our ranks. It would have been easy to hide it, to sweep it under the rug to protect our reputation. But that's not who we are. We chose transparency. We chose justice. We chose to do the hard right thing over the easy wrong thing. Today, we break ground not just on a building project, but on a new chapter. A chapter where Meridian Development Group stands fully in the light, where our values match our actions, where every employee knows they're part of something meaningful. The applause was thunderous. As I wielded the ceremonial shovel, breaking ground on my flagship project, I felt something shift inside me. The weight I'd been carrying for 3 years, the weight of deception, of fear, of constantly looking over my shoulder finally lifted. I was free. That evening, I hosted a small dinner at my home. Not a big corporate event, but an intimate gathering. My mother, David, and his wife, Margaret Chen, Lisa Santos, and a few other trusted colleagues. We ate, drank good wine, and talked about everything except business. As the evening wound down and guests departed, my mother pulled me aside on the front porch. "Your father would be so proud," she said, tears in her eyes, "not just of what you've built, but of who you've become. You took a terrible situation and turned it into something powerful. You didn't just survive, you thrived." "I learned from the best," I said, hugging her. "You showed me how to be strong after Dad died, how to keep going when everything feels impossible. And you showed me that his death wasn't in vain. His values live on in you, in everything you build. That's the greatest legacy a parent can have." After she left, I stood on my porch, my house, my empire, and looked out at the quiet street. The Victorian townhouse had been a home with Kareem, but it had also been a prison, a stage where I performed a role. Now it was simply mine, filled with truth instead of lies. A year after the trial, I gave a keynote speech at a women's business conference. The organizers had titled my session, "From Betrayal to Breakthrough: Building an Empire on Your Own Terms." I told my story honestly, the deception, the discovery, the choice to document rather than immediately confront, the satisfaction of justice served. But I also talked about what I'd learned. Protecting yourself isn't the same as hiding yourself. I told the audience of hundreds of women entrepreneurs. I thought I was being smart by concealing my success, but really, I was living in fear. Fear that anyone who knew the truth would try to use me. And yes, Kareem proved that fear was justified. But he was one person, not all people. The lesson isn't to never trust. The lesson is to trust wisely, to build relationships on honesty while maintaining appropriate boundaries, to recognize red flags early, to value yourself enough to walk away from anyone who diminishes you, and most importantly, to never, ever let someone else's betrayal define you. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. After the speech, dozens of women approached me, some with their own stories of betrayal, others seeking advice, still others just wanting to say thank you. One young woman, probably in her mid-20s, waited until the crowd thinned. "Miss Blackwell, I'm about to start my own development company, and I just broke up with my boyfriend because he kept pressuring me to put his name on the business papers. I was starting to think I was being paranoid. But your story, it reminded me that protecting yourself isn't paranoia, it's wisdom." I took her hand. "Trust your instincts. Build your empire on your own terms. And never apologize for being successful." 2 years after the trial, I stood in my office looking at renderings of the completed Jefferson Street project. It was beautiful, modern but warm, profitable but ethical. Exactly what I'd envisioned. The affordable housing units had a waiting list of 400 families. The local businesses were thriving. The community center hosted everything from job training to art classes. My phone rang. An unknown number, but something made me answer. "Maya?" A woman's voice, tentative and unfamiliar. "Yes. This is Layla Mansour." I sat down slowly, processing. "You're in prison." "I know. I'm calling from the facility. I had to use favors to get this number, to get permission for this call." She paused. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not the sorry I got caught kind. "What I did to you was inexcusable. I was greedy, cruel, and stupid. And I'm paying for it. Why call me? Because you deserved better. Because in here, I've had nothing but time to think about what I did. Who I was. My mother stopped visiting 6 months ago. My friends abandoned me. My family in Dubai disowned me. I've lost everything, and I'm realizing it's because I deserved to lose it. I listened, saying nothing. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Layla continued. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. And that what you built, I read about the Jefferson Street project in the prison library. It's amazing. You're amazing. I wish I'd been someone who appreciated that instead of tried to destroy it. Layla, I said carefully. I appreciate the call. I do. But you're right. I can't forgive you. Not because I'm holding a grudge, but because forgiveness requires a relationship, and we don't have one. What you can do is learn from this. Be better when you get out. Build something real, instead of trying to steal someone else's success. I will, she said quietly. Thank you for listening. After she hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about redemption, about consequences, about the long road from who we are to who we want to become. 3 years after the trial, I met someone. His name was Daniel Park, a nonprofit director working on affordable housing initiatives. We met at a city council meeting where I was presenting the Jefferson Street project's community impact data. He asked smart questions, challenged some of my assumptions, and invited me to coffee to continue the discussion. This time, I was honest from the first date. I should tell you up front, I'm the CEO of Meridian Development Group. I own the company, and I'm worth about $400 million. I'm telling you now because I've learned the hard way that hiding who you are doesn't protect you, it just delays the inevitable. Daniel smiled. I appreciate the honesty. I should tell you that I drive a 10-year-old Honda, live in a rent-controlled apartment, and my nonprofit salary is $65,000 a year. I'm telling you because I've learned the hard way that relationships built on anything other than honesty don't last. 6 months later, we were still together. He never asked me for money, never suggested I should invest in his organization beyond appropriate professional channels, never treated me differently because of my wealth. He fell in love with Maya, the woman who spent weekends volunteering at community centers, who argued passionately about zoning laws, who cried at sappy movies and laughed too loud at bad jokes. Standing in my house, our house now. As I'd asked him to move in, I realized what I'd learned from everything that happened with Kareem. Betrayal happens. Some people will always see others as opportunities rather than human beings. But the answer isn't to hide, to diminish yourself, to live in fear. The answer is to be authentically yourself and trust that the right people will value that. Kareem taught me that I was strong enough to survive betrayal, smart enough to document crimes, patient enough to wait for justice. But Daniel taught me that I was still capable of trust, still deserving of love, still able to open my heart despite the scars. 5 years after the trial, Kareem was released early for good behavior. I received a notification from the prosecutor's office. He was deported to Lebanon within hours of his release. I never heard from him again, and that was exactly as it should be. But I did hear about him once more, indirectly. David had connections throughout the Middle East, and he mentioned casually over lunch that Kareem was working as a construction foreman in Beirut, living in a small apartment, his reputation in tatters. No company would hire him for senior management. No woman would date him once they learned his history. He got exactly what he deserved, David said. No, I corrected gently. He got exactly what he earned. There's a difference. That night, I stood on my porch again, a habit I'd developed, this moment of reflection in the quiet evening. Daniel came out to join me, wrapping an arm around my waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. About how far I've come. About all the things I've learned. About how grateful I am to be standing here, in my home, in my truth, with someone who sees me for who I really am. And who are you really? He asked, smiling. I'm Maya Blackwell. I'm a developer, a CEO, a daughter, a partner. I'm someone who was betrayed but refused to be broken. I'm someone who chose justice over revenge, truth over deception, and hope over cynicism. I'm someone who built an empire and learned that the real success isn't the buildings or the bank balance, it's knowing exactly who you are and refusing to apologize for it. He kissed my temple. That's a pretty good answer. I laughed. I've had a lot of time to think about it. Inside, my phone buzzed with a notification. Another project approved. Another development ready to break ground. Another opportunity to build something meaningful. My empire continued to grow, but now it grew in the light, visible and proud. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago, pretending to be someone else, hiding my success, living in constant fear of discovery. I thought about the moment I'd heard Kareem say she'll be gone soon, and how I'd responded not with panic but with strategy. And I thought about who I'd become, a woman who knew her worth, who demanded respect, who built her life on a foundation of truth. As Daniel and I walked back inside, I took one last look at the Washington skyline, at the city where I'd built my empire, where I'd survived betrayal, where I'd found justice and love and redemption. She'll be gone soon, Kareem had said. But he was wrong. I wasn't gone. I was right here. Stronger than ever. Living my truth. Building my legacy. And absolutely thriving. This was my house, my company, my empire, my life. And no one would ever take it from me again. The end.